As the sun set over the desolate landscape of America, the Great Depression had left its mark on the nation. Banks had failed, homes were repossessed, and people were suffering. In the midst of this chaos, a figure emerged, a man who would capture the hearts and minds of the American public, John Dillinger. Dillinger's early life was marked by a series of small-time crimes, but it was his time in prison that truly shaped him into the mastermind he would become. He was a quick learner, and within the walls of the Indiana State Prison, he honed his skills, studying the systems and procedures of the prison. This knowledge would later serve him well, as he would use it to escape not once, but twice. The first escape was just the beginning, a taste of freedom that Dillinger couldn't resist. He and his gang, a motley crew of thieves and con artists, set their sights on the banks of Indiana, robbing them with a precision and speed that left the authorities stunned. The public, however, was not as shocked. In fact, they were fascinated by Dillinger's brazen crimes, and soon he became a folk hero, a symbol of resistance against the establishment. The media played a significant role in Dillinger's rise to fame. Newspapers and radio broadcasts chronicled his exploits, painting him as a charming, cunning outlaw. The FBI, led by the indomitable J. Edgar Hoover, was hot on his trail, but Dillinger always seemed to stay one step ahead. He mocked the authorities, leaving them taunting messages and cleverly escaping from their clutches. As the months passed, Dillinger's legend grew, and with it, the public's admiration for him. People saw him as a representation of their own frustration and anger towards the banks and the government. The media, however, began to reveal the darker side of Dillinger's actions. Innocent people were caught in the crossfire, and the toll of his crimes began to mount. Despite the warnings, Dillinger continued to push his luck, becoming increasingly reckless and violent. His associates began to turn against him, and the FBI closed in. It was only a matter of time before Dillinger's world came crashing down. In the end, it was a combination of betrayal and circumstance that led to Dillinger's downfall. A tip from an informant, paired with the FBI's relentless pursuit, finally brought him to an end. On July 22nd, 1934, John Dillinger was shot dead outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago, his life cut short by the very authorities he had so brazenly defied. As the news of Dillinger's death spread, America was shocked. The media exploded with headlines, and the nation was left to grapple with the consequences of Dillinger's actions. The FBI, emboldened by their victory, began to tighten their grip on the country, ushering in a new era of law enforcement that would forever change the way America dealt with crime. In the end, John Dillinger's legacy was one of both fascination and tragedy. He became a legend not because he robbed banks, but because America was desperate enough to believe in him. His story serves as a reminder that crime has consequences, and that legends often hide pain. As we reflect on the life of John Dillinger, we are reminded of the importance of honest history and the enduring impact of the choices we make. As you reflect on the story of John Dillinger, we ask that you share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. Like this video to support the documentary, and subscribe for more in-depth true crime stories. In the next episode, we'll be exploring the life of another infamous outlaw, one who would leave an even greater mark on American history. America was on its knees during the Great Depression. Banks had taken everything, leaving families with nothing but empty pockets and shattered dreams. The once thriving economy had imploded, and the nation was plunged into a darkness that seemed to have no end. And from that anger, one outlaw became a symbol, John Dillinger. As the sun set over the desolate landscape of America, the Great Depression had left its mark on the nation. Banks had failed, homes were repossessed, and people were suffering. The streets were empty, the once thriving city centers now a ghost town. The only sound was the hum of desperation, the whispers of hopelessness that seemed to echo through every corner of the country. Banks were the epicenter of this crisis. They had taken everything from the people, leaving them with nothing but debt and despair. The system had failed, and the public was left to pick up the pieces. The anger towards banks was palpable, a anger that simmered just below the surface, waiting to boil over. And in this cauldron of anger, a figure emerged, a man who would capture the hearts and minds of the American people. This was the time when America was ripe for an outlaw, a man who would challenge the status quo and defy the authorities. The public was looking for a hero, someone who would take on the system and fight for what was right. And in John Dillinger, they found that hero. He was a man with a plan, a man who would take on the banks and rob them blind. He was a man who would challenge the FBI and mock the authorities, all while becoming the most hunted man in America. But why did the public love John Dillinger? Why did they admire him and celebrate his crimes? It's because he tapped into a deep-seated anger that had been building for years. He spoke to the American people in a language they understood. A language of defiance, of resistance, of taking back what was rightfully theirs. He was a symbol of hope in a time of despair, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way to fight back. And John Dillinger was more than just a bank robber. He was a folk hero, a man who had captured the hearts and minds of the American people. His crimes were not just about stealing money, but about challenging the system and taking on the authorities. He was a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, and in that, he found a strange kind of admiration from the public. But the government was not amused. The FBI was hot on his trail, and J. Edgar Hoover was determined to bring him down. The manhunt was on, and Dillinger was always one step ahead. He would rob banks, escape from prison, and mock the authorities, all while becoming more and more brazen in his crimes. He was a man who lived in the shadows, always looking over his shoulder, but never looking back. The public was fascinated by Dillinger's exploits, and the newspapers were filled with stories of his daring escapades. He was a man of legend, a man who had captured the imagination of the American people, and in that, he found a strange kind of power, a power that would ultimately be his downfall. As the story of John Dillinger unfolds, we will explore the complexities of his character, the motivations behind his crimes, and the impact he had on the American people. We will delve into the world of bank robbers, of outlaws, and of heroes. We will examine the role of the FBI, the government, and the media in shaping the narrative of Dillinger's crimes. And we will ask the question, what does it say about America that John Dillinger became a folk hero, a man who was celebrated by the public and feared by the authorities? The answer to that question lies in the heart of America, in the depths of its people. It lies in the desperation, the anger, and the hopelessness that defined the Great Depression. It lies in the desire for a hero, a man who would take on the system and fight for what was right. And it lies in the complexities of human nature and the contradictions that make us who we are. As we embark on this journey into the world of John Dillinger, we will explore the darker corners of American history, the places where the boundaries between good and evil are blurred. We will examine the role of crime in shaping society and the impact that outlaws like Dillinger have on the national psyche. And we will ask the question, what can we learn from the story of John Dillinger, a man who became both a legend and a symbol of the American people's desire for justice? The story of John Dillinger is a complex and multifaceted one, a story that has captivated the American people for generations. It is a story of crime and punishment, of heroism and villainy, of hope and despair. And it is a story that continues to resonate today, a story that speaks to the fundamental human desire for justice, for fairness, and for a better life. As we delve into the world of John Dillinger, we will explore the tensions between the myth and the reality, between the legend and the man. We will examine the role of the media in shaping the narrative of Dillinger's crimes and the impact that his exploits had on the American people. And we will ask the question, what does it say about America that John Dillinger became a folk hero, a man who was celebrated by the public and feared by the authorities? The answer to that question lies in the heart of America, in the depths of its people. It lies in the desperation, the anger, and the hopelessness that defined the Great Depression. It lies in the desire for a hero, a man who would take on the system and fight for what was right. And it lies in the complexities of human nature, in the contradictions that make us who we are. As we explored the world of John Dillinger, we will discover a complex and multifaceted individual, a man who defies we will see a man who is both a hero and a villain, a man who captivated the American people with his crimes and his charisma. And we will ask the question, what can we learn from the story of John Dillinger, a man who became both a legend and a symbol of the American people's desire for justice? As the sun rose over the desolate landscape of America, a man emerged from the shadows, his name etched in the annals of history as John Dillinger, the bank robber who captured the hearts and minds of a nation. But Dillinger's bank robberies were not just about money, but about revenge against a system that had failed him. Born in 1903 in Indiana, Dillinger's early life was marked by poverty and hardship. His father, a grocer, struggled to make ends meet, and the family was often forced to live on the outskirts of society. But it was during this time that Dillinger's anger towards the system began to simmer. He dropped out of school at the age of 15 and drifted from one dead-end job to another, eventually landing in a series of short-term prisons for petty crimes. It was in prison that Dillinger's true nature began to emerge. He was a quick learner, and his early experiences taught him the art of survival, but also the harsh realities of a system that seemed designed to keep him down. He began to read voraciously, devouring books on law and history, and quickly became an expert on the American justice system. Dillinger's first crimes were small-time, but they marked the beginning of a long and bloody career. He robbed gas stations, convenience stores, and eventually banks, but it was his escapes that truly made him notorious. He would often flee from police custody, leaving behind a trail of chaos and destruction. The public was fascinated by his cunning and bravery, and his legend grew with each daring escape. As his exploits gained national attention, Dillinger became a folk hero, a symbol of resistance against a system that had failed him. He was seen as a Robin Hood-like figure, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. But the reality was far more complex. Dillinger's crimes were brutal, and his associates were often innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. The FBI, led by the enigmatic J. Edgar Hoover, was hot on Dillinger's trail, but he always seemed to stay one step ahead. He would often mock the authorities, taunting them with clever messages and daring escapes. The public was captivated by his bravado, and his legend grew with each passing day. But as Dillinger's fame grew, so did his ego. He became increasingly reckless, taking more and more risks in his pursuit of notoriety. His associates began to turn against him, and the FBI finally closed in on their prey. The manhunt that ensued was one of the largest in American history, with the FBI deploying its full resources to tracking down the elusive bank robber. Dillinger's final days were marked by a series of daring escapes and shootouts, but ultimately, it was his own recklessness that led to his downfall. As the news of Dillinger's capture spread, the nation was shocked and saddened. The public had grown to love the outlaw, and his legend seemed to transcend the brutal reality of his crimes. But as the dust settled, the FBI emerged victorious, and Dillinger's legend began to fade. In the end, it was not the FBI that brought Dillinger to justice, but his own hubris. He had become a symbol of resistance, but also of the dangers of unchecked ambition. His legacy serves as a reminder that crime has consequences, and that even the most charismatic outlaws can fall victim to their own demons. As the years passed, the myth of John Dillinger continued to grow, but the reality was far more complex. He was a product of his time, a man who emerged from the ashes of a broken society. His story serves as a reminder of the dangers of romanticizing crime and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. In the end, it was not the banks that failed Dillinger, but his own sense of self-importance. He had become a legend in his own right, but at what cost? The nation mourned the loss of a symbol, but also of a man who had lost himself in the process. As we reflect on the life of John Dillinger, we are reminded that legends often hide pain, and that the line between hero and villain is often blurred. His story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. The legacy of John Dillinger continues to fascinate us to this day, a reminder of the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of the outlaw. But as we remember his name, let us also remember the victims of his crimes, and the families who were torn apart by his actions. In the end, it was not the FBI that brought Dillinger to justice, but his own sense of self-improvement. He had become a legend in his own right, but at what cost? The nation mourned the loss of a symbol, but also of a man who had lost himself in the process. As we reflect on the life of John Dillinger, we are reminded that legends often hide pain, and that the line between hero and villain is often blurred. His story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. The legacy of John Dillinger continues to fascinate us to this day, a reminder of the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of the outlaw. But as we remember his name, let us also remember the victims of his crimes and the families who were torn apart by his actions. The story of John Dillinger serves as a reminder that even the most charismatic outlaws can fall victim to their own demons. His legacy serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of romanticizing crime and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. As we reflect on the life of John Dillinger, let us remember the lessons of his story. Let us remember that crime has consequences, and that even the most charismatic outlaws can fall victim to their own demons. The story of John Dillinger is a reminder that even the most complex and fascinating stories can be reduced to simple, human truths. His legacy serves as a reminder of the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of the outlaw. As we reflect on the life of John Dillinger, let us remember the victims of his crimes and the families who were torn apart by his actions. Let us remember the lessons of his story and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. The story of John Dillinger serves as a reminder that even the most charismatic outlaws can fall victim to their own demons. His legacy serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of romanticizing crime and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. Let us remember the lessons of his story and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. Let us remember the victims of his crimes and the families who were torn apart by his actions. As we reflect on the life of John Dillinger, let us remember the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of the outlaw. Let us remember the lessons of his story and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. The story of John Dillinger serves as a reminder that even the most complex and fascinating stories can be reduced to simple, human truths. His legacy serves as a reminder of the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of the outlaw. Let us remember the victims of his crimes and the families who were torn apart by his actions. Let us remember the lessons of his story and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. As we reflect on the life of John Dillinger, let us remember the story of a man who was both a product of his time and a symbol of resistance against a broken system. His legacy serves as a reminder of the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of the outlaw. The story of John Dillinger serves as a reminder that even the most charismatic outlaws can fall victim to their own demons. His legacy serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of romanticizing crime and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. Let us remember the lessons of his story and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. Let us remember the victims of his crimes and the families who were torn apart by his actions. As we reflect on the life of John Dillinger, let us remember the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of the outlaw. Let us remember the lessons of his story and the importance of understanding the complexities of the human experience. The story of John Dillinger serves as a reminder that even the most complex and fascinating stories can be reduced to simple, human truths. His legacy serves as a reminder of the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of the outlaw. The FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover, was determined to catch Dillinger and restore order to America. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their reputation for ruthlessness had preceded them. But Dillinger was no ordinary bank robber. He had a cunning mind and a knack for evading capture. The cat-and-mouse game between the FBI and Dillinger had begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. FBI pressure mounted on Dillinger as they closed in on his location. The agency had assembled a team of top-notch agents, including Melvin Purvis, who would become one of the most notorious agents in FBI history. They were determined to bring Dillinger to justice, and they would stop at nothing to achieve their goal. But Dillinger was not one to be underestimated. He had a reputation for mocking the law enforcement officials who pursued him, and he reveled in the attention. He would often send taunting letters to the FBI, boasting about his exploits and daring them to catch him. These letters, filled with bravado and defiance, became famous in their own right, and they only served to fuel the public's fascination with the elusive bank robber. One such letter, sent to the FBI in August 1933, read, "You will be glad to know that I am still at large, and that I am still getting away with the greatest bank robbery in the history of the United States." The letter was signed with a flourish. John Dillinger, the man they can't catch. Dillinger's antics had the public in stitches, and his legend continued to grow. He became a symbol of resistance against the oppressive forces that had brought America to its knees. People saw him as a folk hero, a champion of the underdog who refused to back down in the face of overwhelming odds. But the FBI was not amused. They saw Dillinger as a menace, a threat to the very fabric of society. They were determined to catch him, no matter what it took. And as the stakes grew higher, the tension between the FBI and Dillinger reached a boiling point. The public's reaction to Dillinger's antics was a fascinating phenomenon. On one hand, people were drawn to his charisma and his bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. They saw him as a rebel, a man who refused to be bound by the rules and conventions that governed society. On the other hand, they were also terrified by his actions, which had brought fear and uncertainty to their lives. As the manhunt continued, The public's fascination with Dillinger reached a fever pitch. People followed his every move, devouring news of his exploits and speculating about his next move. The media, sensing a golden opportunity, played up Dillinger's legend, portraying him as a folk hero and a champion of the common man. But behind the scenes, the FBI was working tirelessly to bring Dillinger to justice. They had assembled a team of top-notch agents who were determined to catch the elusive bank robber and restore order to America. The cat-and-mouse game between the FBI and Dillinger had reached its most intense point yet, and the stakes were higher than ever. As the public's fascination with Dillinger reached a boiling point, the FBI knew that they had to act fast. They were determined to catch him, no matter what it took. But Dillinger was not one to be underestimated. He had a reputation for being cunning and resourceful, and he would stop at nothing to evade capture. The question on everyone's mind was, would the FBI finally catch Dillinger, or would he continue to evade them? The answer, as always, hung in the balance, waiting to be revealed in the next chapter of this epic saga. As the manhunt continued, the tension between the FBI and Dillinger reached a breaking point. The public's fascination with Dillinger had created a sense of unease and uncertainty, and the stakes were higher than ever. The question on everyone's mind was, what would happen next? Would Dillinger continue to evade capture, or would the FBI finally catch him? The answer, as always, hung in the balance, waiting to be revealed in the next chapter of this epic saga. The story of John Dillinger, the bank robber who captured the hearts and minds of a nation, was far from over. The manhunt had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. As the cat-and-mouse game between the FBI and Dillinger reached its most intense point yet, the tension between them was palpable. The public's fascination with Dillinger had created a sense of unease and uncertainty, and the stakes were higher than ever. The question on everyone's mind was, what would happen next? Would Dillinger continue to evade capture, or would the FBI finally catch him? The answer, as always, hung in the balance, waiting to be revealed in the next chapter of this epic saga. The manhunt was on, and the world was watching with bated breath. The question was, would the FBI finally catch Dillinger, or would he continue to evade them? The answer, as always, hung in the balance, waiting to be revealed in the next chapter of this epic saga. The story of John Dillinger, the bank robber who captured the hearts and minds of a nation, was far from over. The manhunt had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. As the cat-and-mouse game between the FBI and Dillinger reached its most intense point yet, the tension between them was palpable. The public's fascination with Dillinger had created a sense of unease and uncertainty, and the stakes were higher than ever. The question on everyone's mind was, what would happen next? Would Dillinger continue to evade capture, or would the FBI finally catch him? The answer, as always, hung in the balance, waiting to be revealed in the next chapter of this epic saga. America was on its knees during the Great Depression, the once great nation crippled by economic collapse and a sense of desperation that hung in the air like a specter. Banks had taken everything's savings, hope, and in some cases, even lives. And from that anger, one outlaw became a symbol, John Dillinger. Dillinger's charm and charisma were undeniable, and as he robbed bank after bank, he became a folk hero to many. People whispered his name in awe, as if he were a modern-day Robin Hood. But at what cost? Behind the myth, the reality was far more complex, and the consequences of his actions would shake America to its core. One of the reasons Dillinger captured the public's imagination was his brazen audacity. He seemed to defy the authorities at every turn, escaping from prison and mocking the FBI with a sense of impunity that was both thrilling and terrifying. The press fed off his legend, printing sensational stories about his exploits and cementing his status as America's most wanted man. But as the myth grew, so did the reality of Dillinger's crimes. Innocent people were caught in the crossfire, hurt or killed in the chaos that followed his bank robberies. Store owners, bank employees, and even ordinary citizens were caught in the middle, forced to live in fear of the man who had become a symbol of rebellion. The myth versus reality of Dillinger's crimes is a fascinating one. To his supporters, it was a hero, a man who dared to challenge the system and fight against the injustices of the time. To the authorities, it was a cold-blooded killer, responsible for the deaths of countless people. And to the victims, he was a monster, a man who had taken everything from them and left them with nothing. As Dillinger's legend grew, so did the fear that gripped America. People were terrified of being caught in the crossfire, of being the next victim of Dillinger's gang. The government responded with a vengeance, deploying the FBI in force to track down the outlaw and bring him to justice. But Dillinger was not just a bank robber. He was a symptom of a greater problem, a society in crisis that was desperate for a hero. As the Great Depression wore on, people became increasingly disillusioned with the system, feeling that the government and the banks had failed them. Dillinger tapped into that anger, becoming a symbol of rebellion against the status quo. The FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover, was determined to catch Dillinger and restore order to America. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their reputation for ruthlessness had preceded them. But Dillinger was no ordinary bank robber. He had a network of supporters, a gang of loyal followers who were willing to risk everything to help him evade capture. As the manhunt for Dillinger intensified, the stakes grew higher and higher. The public was on the edge of their seats, waiting to see what would happen next. Would Dillinger be caught, or would he continue to evade the authorities? The tension was palpable, and the outcome was far from certain. As we delve deeper into Dillinger's story, we'll explore the complexities of his legend, the myths and the reality of his crimes. We'll examine the impact he had on America and the lasting legacy he left behind. But for now, let's pause and consider the question that has haunted America for decades. What makes a man a hero, and what makes him a villain? As Dillinger's fame grew, so did his ego and his violence. He was no longer the charming, clever bank robber who had won the hearts of the American people. He had become a ruthless, calculating individual who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Dillinger's associates began to die or betray him, a testament to the increasing violence he was willing to unleash. His reputation as a fearless outlaw spread far and wide, but so did the fear he inspired. Those who had once admired him now trembled at the mention of his name. The FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover, was determined to catch Dillinger and bring an end to his reign of terror. They'd been tracking him for months, following every lead, every tip, every hint that might bring them closer to their quarry. And now, with Dillinger's ego and violence growing by the day, they saw their chance. But Dillinger was becoming careless, taking more and more risks in his pursuit of fame and fortune. He began to flaunt his notoriety, daring the authorities to catch him, to prove his invincibility. And the public, which had once idolized him, began to see him for what he truly was: a violent, arrogant outlaw with no regard for human life. The cost of fame was starting to take its toll on Dillinger. He had lost touch with reality, with the people who had once supported him. He had become a symbol of rebellion, of resistance to the establishment, but he had also become a monster, a creature driven by his own ego and desires. As the FBI closed in, Dillinger's world began to crumble. His associates turned against him. His reputation was in tatters, and his ego was shattered. He was no longer the invincible outlaw he once was, but a desperate, cornered animal, fighting for his life. The FBI, sensing their chance, increased their efforts to catch Dillinger. They set up roadblocks, checked every hotel room, every diner, every gas station, searching for any sign of the notorious outlaw. And finally, after months of chasing, after countless leads and false starts, they found him. In a small hotel room in Chicago, the FBI cornered Dillinger, trapping him in a room with no way out. He was surrounded by agents, his guns trained on him, his fate all but sealed. And in that moment, John Dillinger knew that his legend was about to come to an end. The FBI had finally caught up with the man who had become America's most wanted gangster. But as they took him away, as they shut the door on his reign of terror, the question remained: what had driven Dillinger to such extremes? What had made him into the monster he had become? The answer, like so much else about Dillinger's life, remained a mystery, a puzzle that would be solved only in the years to come. But one thing was certain: John Dillinger's story would never be forgotten, a testament to the power of fame and the dangers of violence. As the FBI led him away, Dillinger's legend was already beginning to fade, replaced by a new reality, one that would be shaped by the consequences of his actions. And as the American people watched, mesmerized by the drama unfolding before their eyes, they couldn't help but wonder what would become of the man who had once been the most wanted outlaw in the country. The FBI had Dillinger in their sights, but would they be able to catch him? As the months went by, the stakes were higher than ever, and the gangster's associates began to feel the heat. Some of them grew wary of Dillinger's increasing violence and reckless behavior, while others remained fiercely loyal, convinced that their leader was invincible. One of the most significant betrayals occurred when Dillinger's associate, Harry Pierpont, began to work secretly with the FBI. Pierpont, who had been part of Dillinger's inner circle since the early days of their crime spree, had grown tired of the gangster's antics and was now willing to cooperate with the authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. With Pierpont on their side, the FBI was able to gather crucial information about Dillinger's movements and plans. They learned that he was hiding in a small boarding house in Chicago, where he had been living under an assumed name. The FBI agents, led by Melvin Purvis, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for being one of the best in the business, devised a plan to capture Dillinger once and for all. As the agents closed in on the boarding house, Dillinger's tension grew. He had become increasingly paranoid, convinced that the FBI was closing in on him. He had taken to wearing a fake mustache and a wig to disguise himself, but he knew that it was only a matter of time before he was caught. The night of July 22nd, 1934, was the night that everything closed in on Dillinger. The FBI agents, armed with guns and a sense of determination, surrounded the boarding house, ready to take down the notorious gangster. As they burst through the doors, Dillinger was caught off guard, and in a split second, his life was over. The scene that unfolded was one of chaos and confusion. Dillinger's body lay on the floor, a victim of a hail of bullets fired by the FBI agents. The room was filled with the sound of screams and gunfire, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and sweat. In the days that followed, the news of Dillinger's death sent shockwaves across the country. The public was in a state of mourning, and the media was filled with headlines and stories about the gangster's final hours. As the reality of Dillinger's fate sunk in, the American people were left to wonder what had driven him to such a violent and tragic end. The death of John Dillinger marked the end of an era, and it marked a turning point in the history of law enforcement in America. The FBI had finally caught its most elusive target, and the public was left to grapple with the consequences of Dillinger's actions. As the dust settled, the nation was left to ponder the question: what had driven a man to become a legend, and at what cost? The final night of John Dillinger's life would be a tragic and shocking end to an era. It was July 22nd, 1934, and Dillinger had been on the run for months, evading the FBI's relentless pursuit. He had become a ghost, a shadow of his former self, always looking over his shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dillinger's crew had been getting nervous, and some of them had started to question his leadership. They had seen the violence escalate, the body count rise, and the FBI closing in. But Dillinger was convinced he could outrun them, outsmart them, and outgun them. He had become a master of evasion, a maestro of mayhem. As the sun set over the Indiana countryside, Dillinger and his girlfriend, Ebeline, pulled into a small town, Mooresville, in a stolen car. They had been on the road for hours, and the tension was palpable. Dillinger was getting anxious, his nerves were frayed, and his patience was wearing thin. The plan was to lay low for a while, to let the heat die down, and to regroup. But as they arrived in Mooresville, they spotted a group of FBI agents, led by Agent Melvin Purvis, who had been tracking Dillinger for weeks. The agents had set up a sting, a trap, a final showdown. Dillinger's instincts kicked in, and he knew he was in trouble. He tried to escape, but it was too late. The agents had him surrounded, and in a hail of gunfire, Dillinger was shot and killed. It was a tragic end to a tragic era, a final curtain call for a man who had become a symbol of rebellion, of resistance, and of despair. As the news spread, America was shocked. The headlines exploded. The newspapers were filled with stories of Dillinger's final hours, and the public was left to pick up the pieces. The myth had been shattered, the legend had been broken, and the era of the romantic outlaw had come to an end. The FBI had finally gotten their man, but at what cost? The agency had been forever changed, its reputation forever tarnished. The public had been left to wonder, to question, and to debate. A Dillinger being a hero, a villain, or something in between. The answers would be debated for years to come. But one thing was certain: John Dillinger's legacy would live on, a reminder of the dark side of human nature, of the consequences of our actions, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. The death of John Dillinger marked the end of an era, a new beginning for law enforcement, and a renewed sense of hope for a nation that had been torn apart by violence and despair. As the dust settled, the nation began to heal, to rebuild, and to rediscover its sense of purpose. The memory of Dillinger would linger, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, of the importance of justice, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. John Dillinger's legacy would be one of fear, fascination, and consequence. The man who robbed banks, escaped prisons, and mocked the FBI left an indelible mark on America's psyche. But as the years went by, the myths surrounding Dillinger began to crumble, revealing a complex and troubled individual. The FBI, once seen as bumbling and ineffective, had undergone a significant transformation under J. Edgar Hoover's leadership. The agency had gained power and sophistication, with a renewed focus on catching high-profile criminals like the romantic outlaw era, which had romanticized figures like Jesse James and Billy the Kid, was coming to an end. As the FBI's capabilities improved, so did its tactics. Agents began to use more aggressive methods to track down suspects, often going undercover and infiltrating Dillinger's inner circle. The gangster's associates, once loyal and devoted, began to turn against him, providing valuable information to the FBI. One such associate, Anna Sage, would ultimately play a crucial role in Dillinger's downfall. A Romanian immigrant with a troubled past, Sage had become embroiled in Dillinger's world and had grown tired of his increasingly violent behavior. She agreed to cooperate with the FBI, providing them with vital information about Dillinger's whereabouts. The final showdown between Dillinger and the FBI took place on July 22, 1934, outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago. Dillinger, accompanied by Sage and his longtime friend, Harry Pierpont, had planned to lay low for a while, but the FBI had other plans. A team of agents, led by Melvin Purvis, had been tracking Dillinger for months and had finally pinpointed his location. As Dillinger and his companions walked out of the theater, they were met with a hail of bullets. Dillinger was struck in the chest and died shortly thereafter, ending a reign of terror that had captivated America. The aftermath of Dillinger's death was marked by a sense of relief and closure, but also a growing awareness of the consequences of his actions. John Dillinger's legacy serves as a reminder that crime has consequences, and that the lines between heroism and villainy are often blurred. As we reflect on his life and times, we are forced to confront the darker aspects of human nature and the impact of our actions on those around us. John Dillinger became a legend, not because he robbed banks, but because America was desperate enough to believe in him. In the midst of the Great Depression, when the nation was on its knees and banks had taken everything, Dillinger's outlaw status became a symbol of resistance against a system that had failed the people. But as we reflect on Dillinger's life, it's essential to remember that crime has consequences. The bank robberies, the prison breaks, the violence, all of these left a trail of devastation in their wake. Innocent people lost their lives, their livelihoods, and their sense of security. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover's leadership, was relentless in their pursuit of Dillinger, and it's a testament to their determination that he was eventually brought to justice. However, as we look back on Dillinger's life, it's also essential to acknowledge the human cost of his actions. Legends often hide pain, and Dillinger's story is no exception. Behind the charming smile and the daring escapades, there was a complex and troubled individual struggling with his own demons. His life was marked by tragedy, loss, and a deep-seated anger that ultimately consumed him. As we remember Dillinger, let's not forget the importance of remembering history honestly. It's easy to get caught up in the mythology of the outlaw, to romanticize his exploits and ignore the consequences of his actions. But the truth is that Dillinger's story is a reminder that crime is never just about the individual. It is about the society that allows it to thrive. Dillinger's legacy serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of desperation and the importance of accountability. As we move forward, let's remember the lessons of his life. That crime has consequences, that legends often hide pain, and that history must be remembered honestly. As we conclude this story of John Dillinger, the bank robber who became America's most wanted gangster, we're left with a complex and intriguing figure. His legend has captivated the nation, and his impact on law enforcement still resonates today. But as we look back, we can't help but wonder, what made Dillinger so compelling to the American public? For many, Dillinger represented a symbol of resistance against a system that had failed them. During the Great Depression, when banks had taken everything and the economy was in shambles, his outlaw status became a beacon of hope. People saw him as a rogue who defied the establishment, who refused to be held back by the rules and conventions that had led to their downfall. But Dillinger's story is not just about bank robberies. and prison breaks. It's about the human desire for freedom, for a chance to break free from the shackles of a broken system. It's about the power of the media to shape our perceptions and create myths, and the consequences of glorifying crime. As we reflect on Dillinger's legacy, we're reminded that crime has consequences, and that the myths we create often hide pain and complexity. We're left with a sense of awe and curiosity, a desire to learn more about the events that shaped America's past and continue to influence its present. So, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts respectfully, and let us know what you think about John Dillinger's story. Has his legend had a lasting impact on you? Or do you see him as just a footnote in history? Your comments and insights will help shape our understanding of this complex and fascinating figure. To support this documentary and encourage more in-depth stories like this, like this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also join the conversation by sharing your thoughts on social media using the hashtag Dillinger Documentary. As we move forward, we'll be exploring more historical crime stories that shed light on the complexities of human nature and the consequences of our actions. Stay tuned for our next installment, where we'll delve into the tale of the infamous Bonnie and Clyde and discover the truth behind their legendary crime spree. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to continuing this journey with you.